Okay, welcome to the Baal Shem Kolel and the Kolel. Very, very special. We're broadcasting from Sfas, Israel, the holy city, the ancient Kolel started by the Tzedek. How old is the Kolel here? It's like almost 200 years old or something. So uh, ancient, modern wisdom. So this week the Rebbe has an amazing Sikha, Tazriya Mitzayra. And the Sikha basically starts off like this. So Tazriya, everything that ever starts off the Sikha saying that now we're speaking about Mashiach actually says something, an extraordinary statement. So remember the context of what was going on in 1991. Some of you are too young to remember, but those of us that are a little older. So it was the Gulf War. And the Gulf War was a massive miracle. The Rebbe said it was greater than the miracles of going out of Egypt. It was, I want to say that correctly. I think maybe he said about the 60 or the 73 were greater than the miracles of going out of Egypt. The Gulf War, he said greater than the miracles of Purim. Maybe he didn't say the greater than the miracles because Purim was over 7 years or 12 years, and the whole sequence, only you put the story together, you realize that it's a miracle. But here, what was it? How many days? 40 days or something. I remember the exact amount. So it was a very short amount of time. 39 Scud missiles fell. So 39 Scud missile fells. One Scud missile fell in Saudi Arabia, killed over 80 people, and 39 not a single person. It was literally miracles. Buildings fell down. I don't know if you were there. You're here. So was it scary? It was scary, because these are big missiles coming. In fact, one of the miracles that happened was that Saddam Hussein was boasting that he would. Now remember, he had one of the largest armies in the world. He had built up an army over many, many years. Thank God, because of Israel, he didn't have nuclear weapons. Thank God, would have changed everything. But he tried to. He said he was boasting he would burn Tel Aviv, and they hit. It was quite a smart move on his part. But they hit a gas line in Tel Aviv, and technically, had that happened, God forbid, it literally would have burnt the city. However, a miracle happened that 3 weeks before they shut off that part of the gas line. So we're talking about open and clear miracles. I remember the time everybody was very, very worried, and all the news and the media, they're building up his army. In fact, it was also a tremendous miracle. The Rebbe quoted this idea that God will be with Edom and Basra. Certainly in the second Gulf War was a massive concentration of forces. In fact, tremendous, literally miracles and predictions from the Rebbe, because Simon Jacobson at the second Gulf War wrote that after the Sikha, where the Rebbe spoke about the first Gulf War, the Rebbe actually kind of called him or communicated with him, said some of the things that I said is actually about a second war. So the Rebbe understood everything that was going to happen. These are massive messianic predictions. The idea, we say it in Yigdal, every Shabbos people are speaking that God will be with us in Basra. So we're talking about things that were predicted for thousands of years happening now, happening then. And the Rebbe says an amazing statement. And the statement that Rebbe says is that we literally in the end of the days of Nisan, I don't want to say the statement wrong. Hold on 1 second. I just want to get the Sikha. I want to make sure that I say it 100% right. Okay. So the Rebbe says, okay, I did remember clearly, but I wanted to kind of be able to read it because it's such a massive statement. He says, Kivin should be a menu ela mamish, im siyumish achoydish nissen, the hoyet heish nasan and a flies. That in these days, mamish, literally in these days, in the conclusion of the month of Nisan of the year Shnas Adenu Naflais, Kolu Kola Kitzin, all the end times for Golus, Kipshute Mamish have ended. In other words, the Rebbe is saying very clearly that Golus has ended. And the Rebbe brings down Ketz HaYomim, Beketz HaYomim, which very, very famous thing about Kol Kitzin refers to Ketz HaYomim, Ketz HaYomim. So now, what does this actually mean? So, and this is very much the theme of the Rebbe. The Rebbe's theme is that we are now in the beginning of Geula. And it's very important to understand because a lot of people don't really get this. Why? Because certainly a person, could be into Mashiach, but look at the world in a way um, like it's so bad. We need Mashiach now. And there's certain truth to that as well. But that's not the point that the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is saying that we've reached a stage in history where basically Golus has ended. And we are in a new stage of reality. And we are in a stage of Geula. And every single talk of the Rebbe is really has the central theme in his idea, which is that we are now in a Geula reality. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that we don't need to see the Beis Hamikdash. Doesn't mean that there aren't some issues. But as I think that if you had to compare the life of a person living today, for example, us right here, right now, here we are, we're Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. Compare that, yesterday was Yom HaShoah, right? Compare that to Jews who were, God forbid, had to go through a Holocaust, and for thousands of years there was suffering and crazy things. So when you look at just the average opportunities and lifestyle of a Jew today, compared to his opportunities and his problems for thousands of years, you would, and the fact that you have Eretz Yisrael, and the fact that you have a great revelation of Chassidus. What does that mean? That means you're already in a Geula stage, that the Geula has already begun. And that's why the Rebbe continues and he says these words, Bavada, and certainly you should take from Miyad Ba Mashiach, immediately Mashiach will come. Everybody will point and say, like, Shekvar Ba, that Mashiach, this is Mashiach, he's here. Past tense. So, in other words, we've already entered into the stage of Geula, and really that's the fundamental consciousness that a person has to have. Of course, a person shouldn't lose their mind and be connected to reality and connected to everything that has to happen in reality. And that's, of course, something that Rebbe often says about a Yid. A Yid has, an ability to have, he has atzmos in him, he has nimna hanim nois. You can hold opposites, right? We're not demanded to have, and this is really the mistake of almost probably every single philosophy and religion and ism, is they always try to box things in a box. This is the reality, here we're going to sell you the box. But the truth is, you can hold opposite realities, because it's not a question of so much what is reality, it's more a question of what is important, what is beneficial, etc. So the point is that if we understand this new era that we're in an era of Mashiach. We're in that beginning era, and this relates to this week's Torah portion, and it's fascinating, amazing thing. So that year, Tazria and Mitzrayim were together. This year they were separate, but that year they were together. And the Parshas Tazria, this year, they're also together. Sorry, they're also together. Yeah. So Tazria relates to Mashiach. How does Tazria relate to Mashiach? Because it says Isha Kit Tazria v'Yoldu Zachar. And the Rebbe says about Mashiach that Kiyudua Shaleda v'Yoldu Reimez al Geula. The idea of birth shows on Geula. Because like it says, Yoldu Tzion es Baneha. Tzion gave birth to her children. Furthermore, V'Leida Zachar, the idea of giving birth to a male, shows al the strength of the redemption, because when we speak about male, it's referencing strength, and that's like it says when Mashiach comes, there will be a 10th song, and it doesn't use the word shira, a song in the feminine, it uses song in the male, shir chadash. Why does Mashiach relate to male and masculine and the idea of strong? Because it relates to the idea that the first Beis Hamikdash, second Beis Hamikdash, there was a destruction. Every redemption had a destruction. But Mashiach will have no more destruction. It won't have any weaknesses. It will be something that's permanent, something that's eternal. That's part of why the coming of Mashiach, the process of Mashiach, is taking so long. Exactly this week's parsha, with many sichas and the Torah on it. That Isha Kisazriya, when it comes from below, when the human being has to work under Avodas Hashem, when you come to God, and almost all the Sikhs Rebbe, we said this, really say the same thing. When you come to Hashem in your, many of us come from a secular world, and we were looking for the truth, and we came to God. So then the Yoda Zachar. Then what happens is it creates, both from your own choice as well as the connection of Hashem to you, the atzmos that returns, creates an infinite bond, something that's eternal. And that's really one of the great secrets of Golus, is we had to go through all this stuff to reach the point that we are going to have a permanent connection. The Rebbe actually says in a sikha something very interesting, which is that a neshama has to come down, a soul has to come down from heaven. Why does it have to come down from heaven? Because we have to prove that the soul is really with God. So what do you mean? The soul in heaven is one with Hashem. All it can think about is Hashem. That's his whole reality. But that's like a prince at a palace. Of course he's one with the king, because that's his whole reality. The whole majesty of the kingdom is the king. Of course, what else is he going to be one with? He's going to play dominoes. But put him as a sailor on a ship and everybody's playing dominoes. Is he still going to be one with the king? Is he still going to? And so our souls, and every soul that comes into this world and is tried and tested by the foolish pleasures of the world and the fears, etc., and they overcome it. And you choose that this is a proof that you are really one with Hashem. Your soul is proven. It's got its stripes, as they call it. Okay, so getting back to the idea. So Tazria shows us Mashiach. Fine. Mitzayra also shows us Mashiach. Why is Mitzayra Mashiach? So it's very, very interesting, because Mitzayra is the name of Mashiach. Like it says that Mash Moishel Mashiach. What is the name of Mashiach? Chivra Devei Rebbe Shmoi. The Mitzayra of the house of Rebbe. Should never, like it says. What's the connection of Mashiach to Mitzayra? There's a passage that says Achin Chalinu Nasa. He carried our illnesses, and he carried our pains. And this poor guy, this Mashiach guy, he's got a lot of suffering. He is amongst the poor people suffering from illnesses. And they have illnesses, and he also has an illness to ksiv, like it says, that he has suffering from our sufferings, and it says that he carries our illnesses. So one of the things we see about Mashiach is that Mashiach actually, unfortunately, has illnesses. And so that's why Mashiach is called a Mitzayra. So the Rebbe asked a very, very, very fundamental, simple, and obvious question. Mashiach is brought down as he's like the perfect person, right? He's even greater than Moshe. He's the greatest of the great. So why exactly are we giving him the name of a Mitzayra? And then the Rebbe goes even deeper. He says, Tazria and Mitzayra are together, and they're both the Parsha, and they're both speaking about Mashiach. But something is weird here. Why? Because Tazria is obviously a positive thing about Mashiach. It's the birth of the Jewish people. Let's say the birth of Mashiach. And yet, what's the whole Parsha talking about? Negoyim, Saras, something negative. And Mitzayra is talking about Mashiach in a negative way. But as the Rebbe comments, this refers to Mashiach while he's in Golus. But when he's in Gula, because he's not carrying his suffering, he's carrying our suffering, our sins. The Rebbe cried once when he said a sikha, I think it was in Basi Lagani, speaking about the Frierdiker Rebbe, that he was ill, it's carrying the sins. It's true, the tzaddik of the generation takes on the sins. We know the famous story of, I think, the Mitzvah Rebbe. He told a young man, or the Rebbe Marash, that this illness is from your sin. They don't want the people to suffer, they take these sins. So, what does this teach us? It teaches us that this is only the time of Golus. But in the time of Geula, Mashiach, obviously, everybody will be healed. Certainly Mashiach will be healed. And we hope that Mashiach comes now and all the tzaddikim can get out of the grave. It's not a great place to be. Particularly, they're kind of alive in the grave, so it's probably even worse in a way. So we hope that they're coming back. So, if that shows Mashiach in the time of Golus, but what's the whole parsha of Mitzayra about? It's about Tahira. It's about purity. So Tazria, which is all about basically the birth, the positive. The whole parsha is about saras, the negative. And Mitzayir, the name of the parsha, which really shows the whole parsha, which is about the negative. The whole parsha is about the positive. So what's going on? So Rebbe actually says that this Tazriya Mitzayir and everything in between is actually a sequence of events. And he brings down something very important from the Kutzah, a very interesting thing. We all know that saras is not a physical illness. It was actually a spiritual illness. Now, there are, of course, many different interpretations, and you've heard many different things about saras, and this is kind of the highest one. Saras, Shalom Aleichem Reb Zev. We are honored to have you join us, a kohen in our midst. So, saras is a situation of, the Rebbe brings up from the Kutzah, it's very high light. Now, this high light couldn't come down into, it doesn't have kalim, it doesn't have vessels that can contain this light. And so we're talking about a person that's shalom. The person is complete. He's complete in his emotions. He's complete in his intellect. Even his basar, even his very flesh is complete. Where's the tzaras? It's on Arbasar. It hit a little bit of his levushim. It hit a little bit of his skin. And even then it's just a nega. It's just a little bit that it hit. It's not like his whole skin. A little bit. And even then, it's not really a problem. Only if the kohen says it's a problem, it's a problem. So we're talking about something that's not even a problem. So what are we actually talking about? We're talking about very high spiritual light that comes into this world. Now, the Rebbe explains that this is really the situation of the Jew in Gaul. So this is a very, very profound sikh, extremely profound sikh. What's going on here is that the light hasn't been contained. In other words, people don't know who they are. And because they don't know who they are, all of Klippa, really, a very deep thing, which many of us are not aware of. We sort of spoke about this yesterday. But the real motivation of evil, like we said yesterday, is to get other people to be evil too. And how do they do this? They do this in a way of being a role model. It's subconscious. The person that doesn't even know that they're doing it. But people know that people copy people. So they role model a behavior which they want other people to copy. Right? So certainly we saw this with Nazism, and we see it with radicalism in any stripe, whether it's radical right or left, whatever it is. The leaders are basically arrogant and they're bombastic and they're even prone to terrorism, whatever it is, because they're trying to bring evil into the world. Now, where does that all come from? Very interesting. Where does this come from? It all boils down to, in a certain sense, a negative self-image. If a person saw himself, the Baal Shem Tov says, a child becomes what you call them. If you tell a child you're a tzaddik, I remember there was this kid that I tutored. He was a little bit of a naughty kid, or not such a naughty kid, whatever. He wasn't so interested. So to get him to come around, I said, "Oh, you're such a good boy. You're such a tzaddik." He says, "No, I'm not a good boy." Why? Because if he could have this image of himself that he's not a good boy, then he doesn't have to learn. But if he has the image that he's a good boy, then he has to be with the program. So this idea, we even do it to ourselves sometimes. Oh, I'm not such a great guy. Why are we saying that? Because it gives me permission to not do this thing. There's a story, I think it was Mendel Futterfass, that he was in the gulag, and it wasn't a joke. And it was a question of life and death, literally. And there was some fish that he could eat. I don't know, some sardines. But the question was if the fat of the fish, that it was the oil, was it kosher or not? And I think his friend, Lubavitcher, was like, Mendel, you might die. You got to eat it. The koach nefesh is the halacha. You know the story. So Mendel Futterfass said, listen, thought to himself, listen, on one hand, he's right. It's a halacha. And if I die, then I'm going against the halacha. And why did I go against the halacha? It's like a chitzoniistic thing. It's like I'm being such a fancy guy that I'm not even willing to listen to halacha just because of the kosher fish. So he said, but listen, I've always been a chitzon. It's not such a problem. I've always such a chitzoniistic guy. So anyway, thank God he lived. fact, it ever said that the Yidden that went through the Gulag, those years weren't under the calendar of their life. And you see many of them lived into the 90s, 100s. They lived many, many years. For what, a long life, yeah? I don't know. I have a bracha. That's interesting. I don't know. There's another story about a person that got a bracha, I think, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to be able to cross the borders, and he went because he had a bracha. He didn't care. He went back from Poland. He had to help somebody in Russia. He went back into Russia because he had a bracha to cross the borders. There's some people. Story with Tzemach Tzedek, some other tzaddikim. I actually saw a picture of it. It's unbelievable. And they had either they were given a paper or there was a tzaddik in Belgium, Rebbe Yankele. I don't know if you heard of Rebbe Yankele. So he would sometimes give people a bencher to use as a passport. Antwerp, yeah. And I actually saw a picture of it stamped like a stamp of a. They would pull out the passport, and once the Tzemach Tzedek was saying that whatever this chassid is crossing the border, and he had him in mind, and then whatever the border guard would see it as a passport. So this is whatever. So it shows that the Eibishter wants anything can happen. So getting back to the subject at hand, so it's a question of how a person sees themselves. A child, and that's why somebody that's healthy always tries to. What does Shem say? He says, "Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu." We're making man in our image. Man is like the image of God. Somebody that's unhealthy, whether they realize it or not, this was the subconscious of Obama. There's bottom line, there was one message, which is to Americans or whichever group, you are bad. That was the message. What's behind that message? And even Nazism, it's a message of you are bad to the other, certainly Arab terror, you are bad. Why do they have that message? Because subconsciously they see themselves as bad, which nobody wants to see themselves as bad. And they want the other person to see themselves, misery likes company, they want the other person to suffer from the same self-esteem issue, which is really the reason behind bullying. What does he care if this other kid is happy in life? But he is suffering from shame, which is unfortunate. Somebody made that happen. And therefore, he wants that somebody else should suffer from someone else should suffer from the same shame. So what is the solution to this whole problem? The solution is the contrary, to understand that you are really a divine soul. You're really godliness. And once you do that, the whole problem falls away. Because the whole problem is that the identification of the person with himself is as a human being. And this, as we said, that Russia does. They have a very sophisticated campaign called disinformation. Russia knows they can't get a Russian to come on to an American television and tell an American, oh, you guys are bad. That's not going to work. Or let's all go do this. Let's go against money or some kind of crazy policy that's self-destructive. You have to have somebody of the society because people will copy something similar. But now, this also gets into this idea, in this week's Parsha, we speak about the idea of Rotzei v'Shuv. We speak about the idea of the Mayim Tahirim, how you're purified. And the idea of Rotzei v'Shuv is a very important idea. And it's very, very interesting what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says that the nature, so this great light comes into the universe and it creates a problem, right? It could create a nega. So the question is, why is there a nega? Why would there be a problem of a great light? What's the issue? The answer is that if a person has a tremendous attraction to Hashem, that's what we call a rotzoi, a desire. But the rotzoi has to have also a shuv. The rotzoi has to have something to be grounded in. So a simple example, if you have a lot of energy, but you can't contain that energy, you're going to have a nega. That's literally what's going to happen. There's going to be a little burn, a little spot, something's going to go wrong. So an example that's given out, the Rebbe brings this example many times, the Rebbe brings it down, is let's say a guy davens. He has this tremendous passion for Hashem. And so what ends up happening is you evoke your emotions. And now if you don't ground that after you're davening in Torah study, because the Torah study is the shuv, the return into the letters, into the Torah also comes from Tiferes. Torah comes from the atzmos of Hashem that can contain the Ratzi and the shuv together. So therefore what ends up happening is somebody that's very emotional, right? We find this with emotional people, that they can be emotional for the good and emotional for the bad. Their emotions can be fluctuating. And we see this very clearly. So therefore, a person has to be able to ground the Ratzon. So the Ratzon comes because the great light is there. The Neshama wants to reconnect to Hashem. But how do you ground that light? And that is what we call the idea of Torah study. Torah study grounds us. And that's why we're meant to have a lot of Ratzon. We're meant to daven with a lot of passion. And yet, we're meant to be grounded afterwards, that we bring that down into the study of Torah. Now, Rebbe also says something else in this sikha. He says that Mesiras Nefesh also balances the two. We know that Mesiras Nefesh comes from the Chida, comes from the highest source from the Eibusher, which is higher than the Ratz and the Shuv. And therefore Mesiras Nefesh is very important, because Mesiras Nefesh, meaning a Yid has to be a Mesiras Nefesh like a Yid. A Jew that has Mesiras Nefesh, that has sacrifice for Hashem. And this is like the famous story of Rabbi Akiva, Nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. Rabbi Akiva, he came into, there were Arba Nichnasu Lepardes. 4 people went into all the secrets of the Torah, right? Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, ben Azai, Acher Elisha ben Avuya. I think those are the 4. And one of them died. He had Kleis Nefesh. One of them became a heretic. One of them went crazy. And only Rabbi Akiva, Nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. He was the better for the thing. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva didn't go into all the secrets of the Torah because he wanted to. He did it because Hashem wanted him to do it. And this is a very, very important idea. The Jew, ultimately, in our generation, excels in this. We're not as smart as the previous generations. We don't have their heart. But one thing that we have even more is we have a sense of bittul, sense of humility. This is the Eibishter. I'm going to go ahead. I have to have Mesiras Nefesh for Hashem. And you have this with Pashta Yidden. I just met somebody the other day, very interesting. Our parents were not religious at all. And they're so passionate about every mitzvah. It really is like to the point of crying. It's an amazing thing to see, because in a way it's the humility, because you didn't grow up with it, and because it's new, and you're humble in a way because it's beyond you, that you're really, really ready to sacrifice for it. You're really ready to give it your everything. So Mesiras Nefesh is the other point that gives you this balance of the Ratzi v'Shuv. So this is a very, 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 very powerful sikha. Why? Because the Rebbe is teaching us in this sikha, you missed the first part, so I'll kind of review it, a couple of very amazing points. The first point the Rebbe said is that Golus has ended. We're in a new dimension. And what is the problem of Golus? The problem of Golus is that we don't realize who we are. Golus is, we don't know our own self. We don't know what's going on. And therefore we can compare ourselves. Somebody once asked the Rebbe, why is there a billion Chinese? The Rebbe said, first of all, look at your jacket. His jacket was made in China. And the second of all, for Bechira Chavshis, right? So a person may compare themselves to one of the 7 billion Gentiles, say, oh, I don't have to be anything special. I can just whatever. But no, you are special. You have a godly soul, which is unique. You're a part of God. You certainly, as a Jew, you have a mission to light up the world. You're special. You're unique. You're special. And once you understand that, all the questions fall away. Because all the questions are based on a false premise that I'm just like everybody else. But you're not like everybody else. You're unique and you're special. And once you understand that, you automatically become that. And the second thing is the idea of that everything is Ratzi v'Shuv. So you have to have a lot of davening and passion, but you also have to ground it in Torah study. How does Torah study ground us? Because Torah study comes from Hashem. It's Tiferes, and Tiferes can mix Chesed and Gvura, which is Ratzi v'Shuv. Chesed is expression. Gvura, yira, fear is kivutz, is repression. So the two things balance each other out. And in general, this is how the whole world works, right? There's the balance, like zeros and ones, expression and repression. These two things get balanced. And when we study Torah, we draw down from a higher source that does it. Another thing that Rebbe says, we have to have Mesiras Nefesh. We have to reveal Yechidah. We're in the final moments with the soldiers that have to bring Mashiach. And there's not a second to waste, because it's not a joke anymore. The craziness and the crazy ideologies crazy what's going on in the world. Nobody could believe that these stupid ideas have manifested, and so we need to go to the truth all the way. Now, last but not least, the Rebbe finishes the Sikha and he says, okay, so what's the, I don't know if the Rebbe says these words, but what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that we have to learn what's the quickest way. It's very powerful what the Rebbe is saying. The quickest way to bring Mashiach is we have to learn the Torah of Mashiach, ideally in a minyan, because the Torah of Mashiach, and very interesting what the Rebbe says here, because the Rebbe says where to get the Torah of Mashiach, where that we can study. So first of all, he says, quote, that all the prophets are filled with B'Torah Shabaksav, B'Divrei Anivim, Shekol Svarim Malayim, that's in bold, B'Divrei Zeh. So all the Svarim are filled with this Torah. And Torah Shabal Peh, we have the Gemara, especially in the end, especially in Masechta Sanhedrin, and the end of Masechta Saita. We have Midrashim, especially in Pnimis HaTorah, beginning with the Zohar, and especially in the Torah Chassidus, and in the Torah of the Rebbe. And this is very interesting. The Rebbe says, and especially in the Torah, the Maimorim and Lakutei Sichos of the Nasi of the generation. Now we all know that Lakutei Sichos refers to Rebbe. I think it's the only time that I've seen him, not that scholarly, but the only time that I've seen the Rebbe refer clearly to himself as Nasi, the name that the Rebbe would always refer to the previous Rebbe. But here the Rebbe says, Maimorim and Lakutei Sichos, so that is a clear reference to himself. And similar to and preparation to the limit of Torah Shel Mashiach, Torah Chadash Me'iti Teitze, Sheyilmid L'Chol Am Pnimis HaTorah, that it'll teach the entire nation Pnimis HaTorah. So again, the Rebbe once said that in previous generations, the Rebbeim gave a little bit, but our generation, people are a little bit thick. So the Rebbe had to give the whole story. The Rebbe is saying you have to read between the lines. The Rebbe is humble. He's not obviously going to say anything in an arrogant way. The Rebbe is basically saying that his Torah is already Torah Shel Mashiach, and that this is maybe it's going to get upgraded, but this is already the idea of Yediyas Alikus, the knowledge of Shem, knowing godliness. Like the Rambam says, Shabbai says, man, at that time, the Jewish people will be great scholars, they will know secret things, they will know the knowledge of their Creator. Now, so the Rebbe says, and adding and learning Torah and the ideas of Mashiach Gula, this is the clear way, to create the his galus, revelation, and the coming of Mashiach and the Gula immediately. So again, this is an interesting terminology, the terminology of his galus, right? Because the Rebbe spoke before about the birth of Mashiach. So if Mashiach is born, he's here in the world, so then we don't necessarily need him to come, we need him to be revealed. And then the Rebbe says, Val shel poil basi, I've come for something practical, and it should be spread in every single place in order to bring about Bias Mashiach, becoming Mashiach immediately. Every single Jew, men, people that are learning, and those that are involved in work, and also women and children, and every single person, according to his capacity, has to learn more in things that are connected to Mashiach and redemption. And how much better that this should be done with a public of 10, because it's known the greatness of 10 people that are sitting together and learning Torah. And this also creates more rega shalev, it creates more emotions when you're with 10 people gathering for the learning of Mashiach. And also, and this is and it's the main thing, and it's obvious that we have to add in doing mitzvahs in a beautiful way, especially the mitzvah of tzedakah. We know the greatness of tzedakah brings the redemption closer. And then the Rebbe says something very, very interesting. We should connect the learning of tzedakah with the addition of tzedakah with the addition of Torah in the idea of Mashiach Geula. Through this, that when we give tzedakah, we have in mind, so it's very important when we give tzedakah, you should always have in mind to bring Mashiach closer. Because this idea itself is part of learning Torah in Geula, because we know that Gedolah tzedakah should have a Geula, that tzedakah brings Geula closer. So we have to have in mind when we give tzedakah that we're bring Geula. So Shem should give us lots of money, so we can give lots of tzedakah to bring Geula. And may it be that our resolutions and all of this will bring Mashiach closer. That immediately we'll have the birth and the revelation of Mashiach, and we'll be zoicha to hear the announcement in the whole world and the whole Seder Yishtalshus. That's quite an amazing statement, that Mashiach has come. And this is very interesting what the Rebbe says, because this is something that I think that is a subtle point, that everybody will point and say, this is Mashiach, this is, and the Rebbe says, and this is the previous Rebbe, the leader of our generation, because those that have passed on come back. The tzaddikim come right away, and all the Rebbes and all the tzaddikim and Nesiei Yisrael and Moshe and Aaron among. In other words, when we say that Moshe Rabbeinu is Goyal Rishon Velachani, he's the first Redeemer, last Redeemer, it's true. And David HaMelech is Mashiach, it's true, because they're all going to be there. And obviously, there will be one, the Rebbe, who is the main Mashiach, but still, each one of them is also a very, 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 very great tzaddik, and they are also Mashiach. So Mashiach is not just, and the Rebbe quotes somewhere that says in the Medrash, just like the rose was made for the Shabbos table, the tzaddikim were made for Mashiach. And psychologically, it's a very fascinating point, because I mentioned this before, but the people that we revere, the Nevi'im, Mishayahu Navi, are revered by most of the world, right? You have, 2.5 billion Christians, and you have 1.4 billion Muslims. So that's already, about 4 billion people, which is the majority of the world. So the majority of the world sees these people as the greatest, as prophets. So the whole world is basically looking for it. So when these people are there on the dais and they see these people, these tzaddikim, what will they realize? They'll realize, the Jews got it right. And that's what it says, that the prophecy says. It says, they'll say, our ancestors gave us a lie. In other words, their version of who Mashiach is not true. But the concept of Mashiach, which they're looking forward to in the prophets and all of that, this is true. So this is a very, very important psychological thing that's been structured, that these tzaddikim are there for Mashiach, because when Mashiach comes, they will be the leaders of the world. You're going to have Avraham Avinu, you're going to have Yitzchak, you're going to have Yaakov. So who is the world going to look up to in that time? The tzaddikim, right? And that's why it says about Yaakov Avinu, that Bikush Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva. Yaakov wanted to have a good, sweet life. He didn't want to have any more tzaras like most of us. And Hashem says, not enough that you can have Mashiach. Because imagine Yaakov Avinu in the times of Mashiach, who he's going to be. They'll be the kings of the world, right? The tzaddikim will be everybody will look at them with the greatest respect and everything forever. We're not talking about for one day, forever, the whole world. So the whole world has been programmed that everybody is looking forward to these tzaddikim, and therefore it's going to make a massive effect, a universal effect on the whole world. So that's very interesting how the Rebbe says here that we're going to point to each one of them and say, this is Mashiach. So it's an interesting thing that I think that's not that well known, but there is, Mashiach is in a way not only one person, it's all the great tzaddikim. And together with all the Jewish people, with our sons and our daughters, the elders and the youngers, from Ashur and Mitzrayim, from the distant islands, we come with clouds of glory to the Holy Land, to Shalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash. And then, very interesting what the Rebbe says here. The Rebbe would often say that to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Rebbe actually once commented that people are wondering, why do I say the Kodesh HaKadoshim? We're not Kohenim. But when Mashiach comes, every single Jew will have the status of a Kohen Gadol, and they will have that holiness. And in fact, the Kohen Gadol was allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim whenever they wanted. And therefore, you will be going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim all the time. In fact, one of the interesting things about the Kodesh HaKadoshim is that it says that between the two kruvim, right, there was no space. So therefore, the entire Jewish people can be between the two kruvim. It makes sense to say that inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you could fit infinite amount of space. So you could have the entire Jewish nation at the same time in the Kodesh HaKadosh. That's very interesting. And this is the main thing, that this happens mamish now. I had a little dream. I saw somebody that passed away a couple of years ago, which is interesting. And I've heard from other people recently that have had dreams, literally seeing people coming out of graves. And I have a student, and he must be a very holy soul. He had a dream. The second time he had such a dream, he saw all the Rebbes in 770. Behind the Rebbes, where all the older people were with two of his grandfathers. So we're talking about that the world is really getting ready for the Tchias HaMesim. It's about to happen. And it's very interesting. And then the Rebbe says that we're going to say thank you and give the bracha on the latest in his galus of Mashiach. We're going to say Shechin. And this is how the Rebbe finishes. Shechiyonu v'kimonu v'yonu lizman hazeh.